So this is a story that has been around for a decent amount of time since May of this year, but I really wanted to talk about it with you guys because I've been meaning to. It's just I've been covering climate change so much. I'm trying to switch it up, but climate change is just so important that it needs to be talked about. Anyway, so this is from Inside Climate News, and it's talking about a study. Climate change threatens thousands of species in our lifetime. An alarming study finds at 4.5 degrees Celsius warming, the world's most biologically diverse ecosystems could see local extinction of half their plant and animal species. So, this is by Sabrina Shankman. Without action to stave off climate change, up to half of the plant and animal species in some of the world's most biologically diverse ecosystems could become locally extinct by the end of the century, according to a new report. And if the world's countries can achieve the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, that picture changes, according to the study released late Tuesday in the journal Climatic Change. The Paris Agreement calls for reducing global warming emissions enough to have a reasonable chance keeping warming below 2 degrees Celsius. If you reduce the global temperature rise from 4.5 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius, instead of having almost half of the species being potentially lost from each grid style we studied, that reduces to a quarter, said lead author Rachel Warren. I mean, a quarter of all species is still fucking dramatic. Like, guys, they're telling us right now, Paris Climate Agreement is looking like best case scenario at the moment. This was back in May. Nowadays, yeah, it's looking like best case scenario. It's probably not going to happen, but even if it does, a quarter of all species, guys, extinct. That's why we are in the seventh or the sixth mass extinction of our planet. This is the study right here, though. The implications of the United Nations Paris Agreement on climate change for globally significant biodiversity areas. So I would highly recommend reading this study. The story right there just essentially covered most of the key points, but it goes really in depth with all of the ways the methodology, the sources and the references and whatnot. I highly recommend you guys go read it, but a little part of it we're going to read here. The study was conducted by a group of scientists from the University of East Anglia in the James Cook University and the conservation organization World Wildlife Fund. The researchers compared how various levels of warming would impact nearly 80,000 plant and animal species in 35 biodiverse regions around the world. One of the key messages is that if we're going to avoid the impacts of climate change on biodiversity in these priority places, the most effective way of doing that is climate change mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, said Warren, a climate change researcher at the University of East Anglia and a coordinating lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change's Fifth Assessment Report. So that's a really good point, guys. At this point, we're so far into this that we're not reversing climate change. We are only going to try and mitigate the worst of the damage. What, if you don't know what mitigate means, which I'm sure most of you do, mitigate means, let's say that you're going to crash a car. You can't stop the car from crashing, but you can try and mitigate the damage and the hurt done to you by trying to swerve or something. You know what I mean? So that's exactly what's going on here with mitigation. That's the only thing we've got going for us. So I want to talk a little bit about what are the exact factors that would cost life and how would lives get lost? Well, there's sea level rise that ruins native habitats, breeding grounds, natural ecosystems. It will cause mass migration, not only at a level of wildlife and different species and whatnot, but with people. I think it's somewhere around 2 to 3 billion people live in areas right now that will be uninhabitable by 2070. That's coastal areas, which will be flooded, and places like in the Middle East and places in India, there's certain places that are going to be too hot. We just saw LA, Los Angeles, hit over 121 degrees, guys. 50 degrees Celsius yesterday. A lot of the species won't be able to migrate successfully because they're evolved specifically for their native environment. And if you don't understand evolution takes thousands and thousands of years to develop traits that help you be successful in your environment. So for example, rattlesnakes, or there's a certain snake that they have like a specific kind of tail that sort of looks like a bug, and they can wiggle the tail around and it will, birds will see it, they'll think it's a bug, they'll come down to get the bug and they'll snatch the bird. Now, the snake didn't just get born with a deformed tail and just, eventually all of them had it. There was very, very tiny mutations that made it so the tail looked more and more like a bug. And since clearly the snakes that had that mutation were being favored to survive, over tens of thousands of years, you get gradual chains of generations where eventually all of the snakes have that tail. See what I'm saying? Because if that's how you survive better, then you'll have that tail, and more of the snakes will get it eventually. Now that's a very, very basic way of explaining evolution to people that don't know. I'm sure most of you guys do know, but that's how evolution works. So a lot of species aren't going to be able to evolve to climate change in the blink of an eye. Not going to happen. That's not how it works. Humans won't even be able to do it, and we're smart. People with money, maybe. Doomsday vaulters, them billionaires with the doomsday vaults that can fucking keep out a nuclear blast times 10, maybe they'll survive, but not us. I mean, a lot of people will die, but I've got hopes for the future. I don't want to be cynical. Hotter temperatures will make some places uninhabitable. Like I said, there will be longer, more extreme droughts. Right now in the western United States, we're in a mega drought. That's why California is seeing insane fires, burned over millions of acres now. Well, it's burned over 1 million acres. I can't say it's been 2 million or, plural, but yeah, well over 1 million acres it's burned so far. We've got giant mega storms. That one just hit Louisiana and Texas. We've got another one heading mega typhoon, one of the top 5 biggest ever in Japan, that is hitting Japan right now. It's insane, guys. This is going to keep getting worse and worse and worse with climate change. So that's another way that animals will die. Also, water holes can turn more acidic or dry up completely. So these very, very important water holes for animals will dry up, and the animal won't know where to go, and they'll die of dehydration. Or it will get too acidic to where they just basically do damage to themselves, or all the fish get killed in the water, so certain animals won't have fish to feed on anymore. It's a disaster. Author Shankman, and I would highly recommend reading more of her stuff, she is brilliant, says this about the study. For birds and certain animals, there is a chance that they can follow their ideal habitat as it shifts towards the poles or into higher altitudes. For reptiles and plants, it's less likely. And for those species already at the poles, like the ones living in the Arctic, there's nowhere further north to run, like polar bears. You guys have all seen that world famous picture of the starving polar bear, with a sea of melted ice around him or her. I don't know, but I can't assume it's gender. This it's a disaster, guys, and I wanted to share this study with you guys, not to scare people, not to fearmonger, but to inform. And my suggestion is focus on candidates locally and nationally that are green champions, that are environmental champions. I say this at the end of all my videos. Try and elect people into office that will change this and that will save our environment. And if there's no one, then you run for office. Be the change you want to see in the world. I know I'm going to do it one day. I'm going to run for office. I live in a city where pollution is probably over the unhealthy level. Over half the months, it's probably over the unhealthy level. But anyway, guys, just gotta take a deep breath. We gotta mitigate the worst of this disaster that's unfolding right before our eyes. Because another problem is climate change is going to make pandemics and future pandemics even more frequent and more severe as habitat and wild habitat and animals get driven more into cities where they can survive off of trash and people's air conditioning and people and man-made structures. And there's also going to be people encroaching more and more onto their habitat as we continue looking for more and more resources. There's a lot that goes into it, guys. I really appreciate you guys watching the video. I would definitely check the description for all the sources. Really, really good information if you're interested in this kind of stuff. I'm not going to ask for likes, subs, or anything. I really appreciate you guys watching the video, though, so thank you for that. And just stay safe, guys.